From the day Eiko got back, her life became very difficult. Her two older brothers had been lost in the war, and her mother was in poor health. She had to help support the family by harvesting vegetables and grain for local farmers. She didn't have a moment to herself. The annual Kunchi festival might have been the only fun I had in those days, but I didn't mind working all the time. Eiko knew that there were many people, both adults and children, who didn't even have a place to stay. Life wasn't easy, but she was satisfied. Eiko first met Sumiteru Taniguchi when she was 26 years old. She was working at a restaurant. He appeared with Osa, a good friend of Eiko's mother. I thought he was kind of arrogant. There was a scar on Sumiteru's face that made him look like a bit of a tough guy. Eiko had heard this man had survived the atomic bombing. He was left with scars on his arms and legs, too. The meeting was arranged by Osa in the hope she could interest Eiko in marrying Sumiteru. Eiko at first explained that she had no plans to marry anyone because her life was so hectic. But Osa was persistent. She returned more than once to plead Sumiteru's case. Eiko knew Osa had been very kind to her sick mother and felt a strong sense of obligation to her. She just couldn't reject the proposal. March 11th, 1956. They had a humble wedding ceremony at the house where Sumiteru lived with his grandmother and step-grandfather. It took place only 10 days after they met. There was almost no conversation that day between bride and groom. That night, they slept on futon pushed several feet apart. The next morning, Sumiteru told me we would go on a honeymoon. It sounded so formal. They left that day by bus for Unzen, a tourist spot popular for its hot springs. During the ride, they gradually began getting to know each other. At the hotel in Unzen, they changed into yukata, light cotton robes, customarily worn when relaxing at hot springs. They were served an elaborate meal in their room, giving them more time to talk. Together they laughed and started to enjoy each other's company. When night came, Sumiteru asked Eiko to help him clean his back in the bath. I walked in and saw a terribly disfigured body. I was totally in shock. She vaguely heard Sumiteru explaining that he looks this way because of the atomic bomb. Sumiteru's story. In 1945, Sumiteru Taniguchi was 16 years old. He had just started working as a mailman. He really liked the job because he could race through the city all day on his favorite red bike. Sumiteru was delivering the mail as usual. August 9th was a hot summer day with clear blue skies. Then, just after 11 in the morning, Sumiteru's body was flung up into the air and then slammed back down on the ground. He managed to get up. His favorite red bike had been twisted into a knot, so he started walking. Sumiteru noticed something long dangling from his left hand. He wondered what could be clinging to his fingernails. It was the skin of his left arm. Many people were wandering around in a daze. They seemed like ghosts. Sumiteru recognized that the Sumiyoshi Tunnel was nearby. It was being used to manufacture torpedoes. He thought he could find help there. Somehow, he got himself to the tunnel. But once he spotted a crowd of factory workers, he realized he couldn't take another step. Fire was spreading quickly around the tunnel. One of the workers loaded Sumiteru on his back and carried him up to the hillside above the tunnel. He left him there. Many other wounded were spread out around him, either moaning or asking for help. Gradually their voices got weaker until finally they all fell silent. Sumiteru was alone, the only living person among the dead. He couldn't move. He could only see that the sun was still up. It was hanging in a very dark sky. Days passed. Sumiteru struggled to keep alive. He drank raindrops from tree leaves and ate some persimmon he just happened to find there. He was saved by the rescue corps, who found him among the dead. They brought him to the post office where he worked, but nobody from the office was around. Thankfully, Sumiteru's Oji-san, step-grandfather, had been out looking for him and discovered him there. Oji-san put Sumiteru on a cart and wheeled him to a couple of first aid stations. He tried to find someone to treat Sumiteru's wounds, but there were no doctors, only volunteers. Intense sunlight scorched the bare, injured flesh on Sumiteru's back. Each time the cart swayed, it stung his open wounds. He was in such agony that he expected to die. It took 3 months for Sumiteru to be admitted to a real hospital. Until then, he was sent from one temporary medical relief post to another because hospitals in the city had all been destroyed. In the hospital, 2 or 3 American corpsmen came to investigate survivors of the blast. They stood beside Sumiteru's bed and looked over his back, and then took photos and shot movies. Nobody thought he would survive much longer. This is where I'm omitting some agony to jump ahead. Life together, the present day. Eiko has been my host as we waited for Sumiteru to return from his daily travels. How was your day? She serves some green tea. When I look at him, Sumiteru seems a bit tired, but his eyes still show energy. He takes a sip of tea and releases a long breath. I gave a speech to 300 kids today. Sumiteru opens the big black bag he brought home and takes out some photos to show me. I always carry these photos and show them to people. I recognize the iconic photo of his bloody back taken by the US military when he was first admitted to the hospital. Looking at this photo, Eiko begins to speak. I remember on our honeymoon night, when I first saw his back, I thought I'd been tricked by Osa and Sumiteru, and of course I was furious. But I quickly figured out that I was more in shock about learning what a horrible thing the atomic bomb was. I didn't really know so much about it, since I was in Korea when the blast happened. I actually started to think, I have to help this poor guy. Taking care of Sumiteru has been a big part of Eiko's life every day since. Each evening after dinner, Sumiteru takes a shower. Then he steps on a scale he's been using for years. This scale helps keep him alive. Sumiteru has kept his weight in a range of 3 kilograms, just over 6 pounds, for the last 70 years. If he gains any more weight than that, his damaged skin can't take the strain. The skin on his back will be stretched too far and torn apart. Eiko explains this to me with a big gesture. Whether he lives or dies depends on how I control his diet. She says this half jokingly, but also half seriously. After helping Sumiteru with his daily weigh-in, Eiko spreads cream and ointment carefully on Sumiteru's body. Does it hurt over here? I see a little crack. His condition changes every day, even every hour, though it's 70 years after the bomb first affected his body. Eiko's hand can feel the little differences. It looks like a magical hand to me. It's warm and strong. Oblivion. Sumiteru has been engaged in anti-nuclear activism since he was in his 20s. He's expanded his activity little by little every year. In 2010, he stood on stage and spoke at the United Nations on the occasion of the NPT, Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons, Review Conference. The conclusion of his speech was met with a standing ovation. But he came back home with extreme exhaustion. During the flight, he couldn't rest his back against the seat. He flew more than 10 hours in economy class and could only rest by putting his forehead on the back of the seat in front of him. Eiko continued. Plus, nobody applied his medical cream on his back while he was staying in New York. He was so sick when he came home. I asked Sumiteru what gives him the strength to continue. His explanation was simple. I promised Senji and the other hibakusha. His closest survivor friend, Senji Yamaguchi, passed away in 2013 after a lifetime of fighting for better treatment of hibakusha in society. Senji had once or twice tried committing suicide because it was so hard to live a normal life. People didn't like to look at hibakusha's scars. They feared the radiation hibakusha had been exposed to could somehow harm others. After almost giving up on life, Senji and a few other survivors organized a small support group. Senji asked Sumiteru to join. There were so many others like Senji. Some of them really did kill themselves, even though they had survived the bomb. The A-bomb is not a one-time thing. As you can see by looking at me now, it affects us as long as we live. People don't know anything about what our lives are like. For most people, it's just a part of history, but that's wrong. Because of the social stigma we faced, most survivors and their families tried to keep their experiences secret. They pushed them out of their memories. Some of them passed away without revealing their secret to anyone. You might be descended from a survivor. Who would know? I always tell people when I give a speech, please don't look away from my ugly body. My hellish life will never end unless I die, so I am not afraid of death. But I am afraid of oblivion. Oblivion of the fear of the atomic bomb. It will lead people to accept the existence of nuclear weapons and other types of nuclear facilities. So I want you to see my body really well. Nuclear power and human beings cannot coexist.終わり。